Hello everyone. I love the fact that what we've done here is exactly what we do in bonsai because we're really good at pivoting. When we lose a branch, we just make another plan. When things get too hot and we wilted leaves, we make another. We can't get to your farm, so we make another plan. So I'm really lucky to be here. This is the first bonsai anything I've attended since that mini convention. Actually, yeah. So actually, really cool. Yeah. So I've brought a whole bunch of trees with to talk about deciduous, but I'm not just going to talk about autumn work because I think there's an opportunity, and you can see a lot of my trees are not ready to be worked on because they haven't decided that they've had enough of autumn yet. And I'll explain exactly when the right time is to work in the trees. But what I'm hoping to do is to show you the result of a whole bunch of different techniques. Because every single one of these trees have had a different technique applied to it. And I'll show you why, and I'd like to share what I've learned. So like all of us, still learning, certainly not an expert in this at all. And I'm lucky enough to have, so a lot of what I'm going to tell you is what I've learned from Instagram, from talking to people overseas, and then I'm lucky enough to have a direct route to Michael McTeague, who apprenticed at Fujikawa Koken in Osaka and under Fujikawa, and he's now spent a year and a half on his own, contracting back to the nursery and growing his own thing. But he speaks fluent Japanese, which is fantastic, and I've been able to learn quite a lot about why. I think that's a really important thing, about why things are done. And what's quite cool, in fact, it's probably the best thing for me. And I heard Hannes talking earlier about why don't we see many Japanese maples and it's too hot here. So why don't we grow them in Durban? No, it's too tropical and too hot. So I want to debunk a whole bunch of myths that we believe. And we believe them for certain reasons. But most of what we believe is purely anecdotal. And so I'm going to talk a lot about anecdotal evidence today. What is anecdotal evidence? But anecdotal is personal. So I learned something through anecdotal evidence. In my garden, with my conditions, with my soil, with my shade net, no shade net, I can tell you that this tree is going to respond a different way. And I say that because I have evidence in my garden that this is how it responds to me, you must all do it that way because that's how it's done. Does it make sense? Which I'm sure you can understand. It's quite dangerous because I can tell you that it works in my garden, but you could be in the same suburb as me in Rand Park Ridge, Johannesburg, and it's not going to work that way in your garden. So you could have a house in Rand Park Ridge. I have a house in Rand Park Ridge. I have one on a south-facing slope. You have one on a north-facing slope. Just those two different conditions are going to mean that your garden is different. I'm surrounded by big trees. I'm very protected. I've got shade net in my garden. Okay, you might not have shade net, but okay, what shade net do I have? I've got 20% for some of it, which is hail netting. I've got 40% for some of it. And actually, what I've discovered for Japanese maples in my garden now that I've taken trees down is that 40% is not enough. I'm going to go for 60%. So I want to have different microclimates in my garden where I can grow certain things at certain times of the year. It's that specific. So what I would encourage you to do today is, I'm not asking you to do what I do. That's not what I'm asking you to do. I'm not even suggesting that. All I would like to do is to share what I've learned in my garden and what I'm busy trying to do, and what I've seen as a result. And I can share as much as I can about the conditions and when I'm doing something, how I'm doing something, and those should be the clues for you in terms of what you do, where you are with your gardens. Does it make sense? So let's get back to Osaka. So this tree comes out of Osaka. This tree comes out of Osaka. Now, we think of Japan, and we think Japan is so much colder than South Africa, right? We think of them not having hot summers, or not for long anyway. We think of them as having really cold winters. It snows there a lot, and it's freezing. That's what we think about Japan. Am I right in saying that? What if I told you that that is the complete opposite to what Osaka is? So if you look at average temperatures, so if you had to Google average temperature for Osaka over the months, there are 3 months of the year where the average temperature is between 34 and 36 degrees. That's like Durban. And the humidity over those months is somewhere around about 90%. But Japanese maples thrive there. So why? Why is it that they don't thrive here? What is it about the conditions? It's 100% about the conditions. So what I've learned a lot is about certain coverings that Japanese will use in their gardens at certain times of the year, and also why. I've learned, those little reed coverings that we reed, like almost looks like matting that is used. What is that for? Is that a summer thing? Very often it's a winter thing because that prevents frost. So just little things like that. It's amazing how we assume that the conditions are so vastly different to what we have here, and actually a lot of the time they're not at all. And Japan also has incredibly variant climates, just like South Africa. So you've got your Cape Town, you've got the Karoo, you've got Northern Cape, you've Johannesburg, Pretoria is different to Johannesburg, KZN, the Garden Route, all different climates. But when we understand the climate, we can understand how we can get things to grow better than we currently do. I will still say that there are certain things. So I got a really nice Eza spruce clump that came from Japan earlier this year, and I haven't seen Eza spruce in South Africa before. I've seen bigger spruce, but I certainly haven't seen a very short needle Eza spruce. But even that, I'm experimenting, because that in Osaka grows and does okay, but it certainly doesn't do as well as it does near Tokyo or inland or where it is colder. So even things like that, experimenting a little bit. Okay, so what I want to say is the more we can talk to other people who live in different places and have success with certain species, and the more we understand why they have success with those species, the more able we are to imitate the same environment so that we can also have that success. So one of the other things that I've learned a lot about, we've got this idea that, so this is a very good example, that Japanese white pines don't do well in South Africa. Anybody want to disagree with me? So why is it thriving when white pines in pots don't seem to thrive? So I can tell you our biggest mistake in South Africa. We spend a whole lot of money on a white pine. Even it's a little white pine, we're still spending it's a couple of thousand rand for this little thing, and now it's a white pine. And we've been told that a white pine is not as hardy as a black pine. Am I right in saying that? Black pines are just indestructible, you can whatever, but a white pine, you got to, no hands can't kill them. We do know that, yeah. But there we go. So it was a user error, is what that was. So in this little pot, we overprotect them. And so what we want to do is make sure it doesn't dry out, because the white pine, we've got to be really careful. And what we don't understand is that a white pine is actually more like a succulent than it is a tree. So what I did with Michael is I said to him, please can I ask you a couple of days where you're watering the white pines in Fujikawa again, can you please video? I want to see what you water and I want to see what you don't water. No problem at all. After a couple of days of doing that, I was like, okay, so those ones that you skipped, please can you just scratch with your finger with the videos? I want to see how dry that thing actually is. I'm like, why didn't you water that? That is so dry. And he said, no, it's not dry enough. So what we are doing with our white pines is we are literally drowning our white pines. We are overwatering them. So that is, the problem isn't climate. Again, a Miyajima white pine, right? So that's a white pine that's grafted onto black pine. It's a whole lot more hardy because it's black pine roots with white pine trunk. So those are hardy, and that we seem to have a bit more success with those. But looking at him again in Osaka, they grow tons of straight whites on their roots and collected straight whites. Now, we have thought for so many years that our climate is wrong. It doesn't get cold enough in the winter. You've often heard that said. White pines don't thrive here because our winters aren't cold enough. Let me go back to Osaka winter. They snow. They had snow this year for the first time in 6 or 7 years. They don't get snow. Their winter's very similar to Johannesburg winter. Yours are a little bit colder, in which case it should thrive if cold is the issue. In other words, they are thriving in areas in Japan that are much warmer and much warmer winters than we even have. So the cold is not the problem. The humidity is not the problem. And the other thing too with Osaka is it can rain pretty much any time of the year. So we also have an argument that says, well, they don't grow here because the rainfall, summer rainfall, which is absolute rubbish. So one of the other things is, and now we've had rain for almost 2 weeks on the trot, right? And if I could, I would be putting my white pines under a solid shelter in my garden where they're not getting wet at all, because I can tell you that in the last 2 weeks they've been too wet. So these sort of things help us to understand how we can do what we do better. Any questions so far? Okay, right. I'm today years old for where I learned a bunch of stuff. So I know why trees color in autumn. I know what the process is, and I understand that. But I certainly didn't understand the differences in pigmentation between the reds and the purples and the yellows. And it's fascinating as to how trees actually produce color. Are you keen to hear? You should be. It's interesting. Right. Okay. So what happens? And I'm going to read some of it because it's new to me. I literally learned it today. But the yellows in trees, the yellow is the pigment that's always there. So essentially, the leaves are yellow. It's a yellow leaf. Why is it green? Chlorophyll, right. So chlorophyll. So in the summertime, because the trees have so much chlorophyll in them, you are looking at green. And what happens in the wintertime is the chlorophyll all starts to recede, and the sap starts to recede into the roots. And so what literally is happening is what produces the green is disappearing, and the leaf becomes the color that it always was. How interesting is that? Hey? Which is why when on certain nutrients, your leaves are yellow, and we look at it as chlorosis. But that's just because the leaves aren't able to produce chlorophyll. It's not because they've gone yellow, because they are yellow anyway.
And they extract the nitrogen from the lower leaves.
Correct.
To the new leaves.
To the new leaves.
Nitrogen is not always good.
There we go. Okay, so that's pretty cool from the yellow trees, right? Now, what's very interesting is what these pigments are called, and I find it fascinating. So, let me go there. So I'm just going to read this a little bit for you, which is quite cool because it's words that I don't understand. During the spring and summer, chlorophyll is so abundant that it masks other pigments like carotenoids. Now we know carrots are orange because they have a high amount of carotenoid. Leaves have carotenoid, which is the yellow pigment, right? So yellows and oranges. So chlorophyll is that abundant that it masks other pigments like carotenoids, yellows and oranges, and xanthophylls. And when chlorophyll production stops in autumn, these hidden colors finally show through. Now, what's interesting about vibrant reds and purples, they come from anthocyanins. Unlike yellow pigments, these are often produced specifically in autumn. Now, this is quite cool, and I think I might have mentioned this to you before, when sugars get trapped in the leaf and react with sunlight. So now you'll start to understand different seasons we get better coloration, and other seasons we don't get good coloration, because the chlorophyll needs to withdraw, and then what happens is those pigments in the leaves get activated with the sunlight. So if you're not getting enough sunlight in autumn, you're not going to get those colors, right? So then the weather factor is the last thing I want to read to you. The intensity of the colors depends on recent weather. The most brilliant displays usually occur after a wet growing season, followed by a warm, sunny autumn days and cool but not freezing nights. So then that also makes sense, that warm, sunny in the autumn, after a wet, lush summer, you're going to get the best foliage. So let's just talk about for a second why we prune, or why in Japan. So Japan, almost exclusively, the Japanese professional artists prune back literally, and it's not even a season, it's a timing. So I'm going to put a couple of trees here, and I'm going to explain timing to you. Now, unfortunately, I just haven't had enough of what I'm going to show you now in my garden to be able to really work on trees now. They're just too advanced. So this tree, I'm late to work on. And the reason I'm late is because what happens as the leaves are coloring is the sap withdraws from the tips of the branches, and essentially what happens with the leaves is the sap withdraws, and then it seals off at the end of the little stalk, and then the stalk drops off. So it actually seals off, which is why what we worry about when we prune is that we are opening up and we're creating wounds, and the tree's going to lose sap. Now, if you're pruning, and this is the difference, if you're pruning in early autumn, as the sap is receding, it's a very good time to do it because it's the least amount of sap loss that you can experience in your trees. As the sap is withdrawing, is the least amount of sap. the Japanese traditionally do it at that time. This is slightly too late. I have no issue doing it now because the tree's already lost most of its leaves. Now, this is a Celtis. What's very interesting about trees, and I didn't bring another Celtis with me, is that most of the Celtis in my garden, I don't have a lot left, but most of the ones growing in my garden, I have, well, all of them, I've treated a little bit differently. This one, I defoliated late. So the last time I normally defoliate a deciduous tree is the last week in January. I like to try and do it sort of mid-January, and then after that leave it. But this one was quite late in January. And you can see the size of the leaves that are produced. They were absolutely minute. They were amazing. And what's interesting is that most deciduous trees, when you defoliate them, the leaves will last longer, and they normally color later and stay on the tree longer. And so what's interesting about this one is that they didn't. But the reason for that is I produced such tiny little leaves and there was no growth. So I haven't touched this tree since I defoliated it. So because I defoliated late, it produced new leaves, but no actual growth. And as a result, the leaves dropped off at the same time as they would the other ones, which is quite interesting. Now, am I going to work on this tree at all? So you can see when I defoliated, I cut it back to silhouette and I cut it back to shape. Am I going to cut this tree back at all? I don't even know where the front is. I think that's the front there. Okay, so I don't have to, but what's going to happen if I don't? So look at the size of the tree. If I look at it from a showing point of view, so I'm already on the cusp of shown size. And if I want to continue to develop this tree as a classical shown, I'm going to have to cut it back. So essentially what I want to do, and it ramifies so quickly and so easily. In 2 seasons, I can't believe what this has done since I started defoliating it properly, right? So a lot of them, any of these longer, I know you can't really see here, but I've got a black t-shirt on. These longer branches, I only really have buds at the tips. I might get growth further back, but I've got buds at the tips. After this, the next season, I'm going to have that much more growth everywhere and that much growth every year. So those are going to become more dense. I'm going to extend the silhouette, which I don't actually want to do in this tree. So what I am going to do in this tree is I'm going to prune it back quite hard this season. If I've got time, I'm very happy to do it now. If I cut this one harder, I'm going to have a lot more back budding. If I leave it like it is now, I'm going to get very, very little back budding. I'm going to get lots of growth on the tips, and all I'm going to do is extend the growth outwards. I'm not going to ramify anything on the inside of the tree. And if I cut this back quite hard, it's going to bud back in places that it would never have done that if I didn't do that. So I'm actually going to produce a much thicker, I want you to remember what this tree looks like now, a much more densely ramified tree. And I'm also going to go in and do some judicious pruning in terms of branches that I don't want them where they're growing, and they're growing into other branches. So this one definitely I will do that. I'm going to speak quite a bit today about how what I've learned about really good branch structure from trees that have come in from Japan and mistakes that I've made before I saw those trees. And I think that we tend to, we're all the same, I'm identical. The sooner we can get a good tree, the better, right? That's the aim, and we want it, and I think we want it too fast. And so what happens is we don't cut back hard enough because we think we're setting the tree back, and we're just pruning the top and we're keeping the silhouette. And ultimately we start to get a longer, leggier tree that has got less density on the inside, although lovely density on the outside. And I think if we took our time just a little bit more patient, we would see much better results. Okay, this tree, the other thing that I will always do in autumn, and this one I did relatively recently, is I will take all of the top dressing off the top of the tree, and I'll take off all the moss. And the reason for that is going to be very clear. This is what this looked like. Now, you can imagine in winter time where very often you don't have to water for 2 weeks. Your trees just literally sit, it's soggy, it's not great, you've got bugs, you've got all sorts. And what's happening here is it's an opportunity to start exposing some of the roots when it's not that hot, so they don't get burnt and they start to harden off before summertime. And summer we're easing into the temperature. So it's a really good time to take the top dressing off. I find if I do this in the middle of summer, I lose all of the top the fine rooting that I'm hoping to produce, because now it's just too hot. So it's a really good time to do it. And you'll see on this, I've worked very hard on the roots. It's got a great nabari all the way around, and it just gets better every year. Okay, right. So I'm going to talk about 2 more trees before I get into the actual work. So this little tree here, this is another important thing to do at this time of the year. So if I just turn this tree around, is there anything that you would imagine I actually need to do quite urgently with this tree? Get the bark dry. Oh, so he just didn't put his hand up. You're going to say get rid of the moss, right? Okay. Yeah, he doesn't put his hand up. Is it? But I can take the moss off, but unfortunately the moss in between this craggy bark is going to keep on growing. So the easiest thing to do, anybody, clean vinegar. If I'm worried, because this is such a small pot, I've learned the hard way. I sprayed clean vinegar on this tree, and I didn't water it that day or later that day because I put vinegar on it. And then when I watered the next day, the vinegar had already, it was just too much vinegar for this amount of soil and the roots, and it set the tree back for the rest of the season. And in fact, I did this early in December, and since then I've had no growth. So I'd be very, very careful when you are putting vinegar on. And with something like this, you might want to cover the surface, spray it, let it dry, and then literally, when it's at an angle, water off the vinegar so it doesn't go into the roots. So that's just something you might be careful about. So I'm showing you a mistake I made. Spray bottle. Yeah, I just put it in a spray bottle. You can mix it 50-50, and that still works, but it's not as effective. Now, here's the thing. So you can go in here with tweezers and get out the moss. It just takes a hell of a long time, and sometimes you end up taking some of the bark off. But here's the thing, when you spray with vinegar, you have to do it anyway, because now you've got yellow moss that's stuck in between the bark. So where I'm going with that is, don't let it get to this point. Okay, right. So this tree, so this moss is going to come off, right? As soon as, now you can see it's starting to color. It's too early for me to defoliate it. And the Japanese will defoliate at this time of the year. As soon as it turns color, they're nurseries, it's professional. They're not keeping the thing because it just looks lovely. Look at the lovely color. It's really nice. I'm not going to touch the leaves until they fall off. It colors, they cut the leaves off, and they cut it back and wire it if they need to. Exactly, right. So this tree, there's quite a lot I want to do with it. I want to bring these branches down a little bit more. You can see the difference. I want to bring some of this down. I want to open up. It needs to be wired. So as soon as I've done some spot wiring this season, but as soon as it's ready and the leaves either dropped off, or if I've got time, I'll take them off, I'm going to wire most of this tree. It's the best time to wire this tree. The branches, you're right, the branches do thicken in autumn. So as the sap recedes, the branches do thicken. They start to become a little bit more woody. So absolutely that does happen, but we've wired when it's already receded. So chances are we're not going to get much growth then. But that is good thinking. Anything else? I gave you the answer earlier. The sap has receded. So the chances of you damaging branches are much less. Now, here's the one thing I do want to say is, when you're wiring deciduous trees this time of the year, just be super careful, because you only know when you've broken something in springtime. Literally, when it grows, it's like, oh, why doesn't that branch grow? Oh, I see what I did there. And in the meantime, you think it's amazing, right? So that's something just be careful of. And then the next thing, and I didn't bring a tree with an example on it, unfortunately, or maybe I did, is deciduous trees thicken up very, very, very quickly in early spring. So if you do wire at this time of the year, you want to watch it almost weekly, sometimes even daily, and make sure you take the wire off the right time in spring. But it is the best time, because you can see. The next best time is when you defoliate. Why? Because you can see it again and then I foliage. And that is normally, when's the best time to defoliate a deciduous tree? So again, anecdotal, October in his garden, not October in my garden. So what do we look for in the leaves? When the leaves have hardened off. As soon as the leaves have hardened off, at that point in time, it's a really good time. So when the leaves have hardened off. And why is that important? Because remember, this is your food factory. And so if you're cutting them off beforehand, they haven't had a chance to actually fully develop. They haven't produced much food. And so you're cutting off all the energy before it's really had time to produce more energy. So give it an opportunity to produce some energy, and then that'll spring off the second set of new leaves. Second time for me is latest, sort of second, third week in January. Okay. No, life does get in the way. It's hectic. Okay, so that's that little tree there. Um, what else did I want to say about this one? Oh, the years I haven't defoliated twice. Last year I didn't, because last year this tree was under 20% shade net, and we had a really, really hot couple of weeks. And at that time, the tree got heat damaged. And I'm sure you've seen with your Celtis, if it gets heat damaged, the tree will be fine, but it's not going to grow again that season. You can write off your season. It's not going to grow again. It'll be fine in spring. It'll be fantastic. It look like nothing ever happened. But the minute you get heat damage, and there can be one day, your entire season is gone. And say my all right, so that's what happened last year. And if that happens, so I should have bought another tree. There was a bigger Celtis that I've got that I'm still developing. It did get heat damage, and it was kind of sitting there, but I can tell it's really healthy. So I thought, okay, it's not my favorite tree. It's a decent tree, but it's not my favorite. Let me try and defoliate it and see if I can force another growth. So I defoliated that the second week in January, and I got these tiny little leaves, some extensions, but a lot of the tree didn't actually bud back. So do I think I've set it back? Probably not, because the leaves weren't really doing anything anyway. I'll know in spring. But again, what I would like to tell you is that if your tree gets heat damage, you can't get it going again by defoliating it. So in Japan, what they do with very heat sensitive trees is they put that matting, that fine, those reeds, which hardly any sun gets through. And the trees are still fine, they grow nicely, so maybe give that a bash. Now we're moving on to a trident maple. I did something for the first time based on what I saw some of the apprentices doing at various nurseries overseas, and it's worked incredibly well. So I'd highly recommend. So this tree has been partially defoliated or cut back 6 times in one growing season. And all I did with this is literally, and you think, in fact, always bigger scissors, and you think to yourself, surely that can't work. Literally, they do this. Hedge prune it, and literally 6 times a season I hedge pruned it. Now, look at the size of the leaves that have come out, but that's not what it's about. It's about the ramification. So this tree has it's never had this bigger growth where the light can't get into the middle. So this tree took strain last year because it had heat damage, but this season you can see this one has now been in the country for 4 years. And if you saw the difference between when it came in and the ramification and now, it's remarkable. It's amazing. So this, I'm literally waiting, but now here's the problem with that. If you're going to cut back like this, as you can guess, you absolutely have to go in and clean it up in winter or early, as soon as the leaves come off. You go in and you cut and clean up. That's super important, and you'll make sure. But the other good thing about this is that all the branches are at the same level, and it's almost impossible to get that right if you are pinching every single leaf. Almost impossible. This one, so probably 3 sets of leaves, and then 3 sets of leaves. And the other thing is that you are encouraging a lot more of the internal buds. But the internal buds that you're stimulating, it's almost impossible to do that if you're letting it grow and then cutting it back harder and cut it back harder. Because all you're doing is you're stimulating 2 on that one. You're not getting the real backbiting. And on this tree, I can't wait to take a picture when the leaves are off and put the 2 up. I know how much is radically more ramified than it was last season. Yeah. So I'm going to talk quite a lot about internode length on these ones as well. Yeah. But very good point. Okay. And you'll notice I say this every time I'm here. Every single thing is wired in. Always. And especially with smaller trees, there's so little real estate in the pot. Okay, so this is a Korean hornbeam, and it's a tree that has come a hell of a long way in a very short space of time. So that tree was never defoliated. Even though I'm hedge pruning it, never defoliated. It's only a partial defoliation. And what I've noticed is the trees respond far better with a partial defoliation compared to a full defoliation. So I think sometimes this idea we have to take every single leaf of the tree, mainly only leave some of the internal leaves, versus hedge pruning or only removing outer leaves. I would encourage you to experiment a lot more with that in your gardens, because I think you'll get much better results. This tree I defoliated completely last year, and it didn't really increase the internal ramification. Got on Michael, said, Michael, what do you do with hornbeams? He says, we never ever defoliate them completely. All we do is remove the bigger leaves on the outside, and relieve all of the internal leaves, and you're going to see a massive difference. I did this tree late, but I'm going to encourage you to have a look and see what has happened, and I'm super chuffed about it. So since I defoliated the tree, or partially defoliated, I've had very little growth. Or so it seems, but I haven't. Because even if you look at a branch like this, I've stimulated every single bud along the length of that branch. So in springtime, every single one of those is going to produce new growth. So this tree is going to ramify massively in spring this year, purely because I partially defoliated at the right time of the year. No, this one I went in individual, and the reason for this is because it's directional. So Trident is not, it's not one leaf, one leaf, one leaf, one leaf. And if you just hedge prune, sometimes you have to go back and really cut back, because you land up getting all over each other. So this one I cut back to leaf, and if you look at if you study this tree, you'll notice that every single place where it's been cut back is for direction, because I want to fill in or increase the ramification. So again, a really, really fantastic lesson that I learned for the first time this past season. Partial defoliation, the right time, and how that stimulates back budding in deciduous trees. Highly, highly recommend. Okay, so I'll leave this one for you. This one, because I defoliated late, it hasn't even started to color. Some of the old leaves have maybe started, but I'm going to get a long season on this one. Okay, it depends what you want out of your trees. You know, it depends on what the look you're going for. If you want this to become more messy, well, then just cut it back. I mean, I could even take scissors and cut it back, and it's going to land up that way. That's not what I want. So I'm going to go in and make sure that I'm cutting for direction, and it's going to take me hours. But that's the beautiful thing. It depends what we want, right? Yeah. Thank you for that. Please come and have a look at this one. There's a lot to learn from here, and I've been amazed at how there were very few branches on here, and the thicknesses were all out. And over 3 seasons, things like this that were they were new. There wasn't even a branch there. I'm starting to get the thicknesses right, and starting to get them to thicken up nicely and get it all balanced and built nicely. So it's coming. Okay, here's the one different. Any questions so far? No? Okay. What is this? It's a tree. Very good. Very good. Good. Is it fruiting or flowering? Fruiting. So here's the clue. If it fruits, it must flower. Yeah. So then it's fruiting and flowering. Very good. Very good. Very good. Yes? Anyone? It's a quince. What kind of a quince? Chinese quince. What is the Latin name for that? I'll start you off. Pseudo-Cydonia sinensis. So this is a Pseudo-Cydonia sinensis. So this tree, it's the Chinese quince versus the Japanese quince, and the Japanese quince is the Chiomylus, depends on how you want to say it, and that is a flowering quince, Japanese flowering quince. This is just the Chinese quince, right? Now, it's imported from Japan again. This one comes from Taikan 10. It was at the Taikan 10, one of the vendors. But again, you can see how the Japanese are absolutely pedantic about how they wire everything and about how neatly everything's done and why it's done. Now, what I want to show you here, and I'm going to pass this tree around, I want you to take a look underneath, and I want you to look at the branch structure. So this is a good tree, and it was relatively expensive, and it's good for a number of reasons. It's good because the ramification is quite fine. For a Chinese quince, that's hard. It's good because it's extremely balanced. It's good because it's tapered. It's good because of the structure. But I want you to look into this tree and you are going to see almost every single fault and rule broken. And we traditionally would never grow a tree like this and call it a classical Japanese
I
tree.
saw that in Japan.
It's phenomenal. What you'll also notice is how much of the tree is in the front and how the back isn't too different. You'll look at the balance, you look at, but a couple of things that are really important about this is the leaf size is tiny. And again, it's just really good bonsai principles over and over and over again. This tree came into South Africa in February, and it came in with nothing. It came in from winter, and in a very short space of time it produced leaves. I've cut it back twice already in our season, so it's acclimatized. You see it's starting to change color, but I won't defoliate it. I won't partially defoliate. I won't do anything like that because it needs to acclimatize. Okay, so let me pass this around, but I want you to actually take a look and study the tree, and you can count how many faults there are, because there are tons.
Did you do that?
Would I leave the faults? Well, they're not faults. None of them are faults.
None of them are faults.
Why do we think they're faults? We are taught to believe that you can't have two branches coming out of the same place in the tree because it's ugly and because it's going to produce a thing. But show me nature where nature respects that rule. It doesn't. You know what I mean? So I didn't bring a couple of other conifers that I've got in because I thought this is not conifer talk. I'll save that. But if you had to study some of those trees that have been styled by professionals since they were tiny, they break every single rule. Westerners, we've got such a curious idea of what and why, but they're not even considered rules there. But I think they were trying to teach us concepts. I think they were trying to teach us concepts, and then we were like, this is a hard and fast rule, you know. That's what I think. Okay, so and I'm going to show you on that tree as well. All right, let's talk about these two trees. I'm going to talk about this one first. Okay, I am going to work on this tree now because the leaves are stuffed. It's probably not really getting much in it, and if it shoots again, I really don't mind. Now, if I leave this branch in winter, right, and remember what's going to happen? That's what's going to happen in autumn. It's going to lose every single one of the leaves, right? In springtime, at the beginning of spring, as the sap starts to flow, where's the sap going to flow? All the way to the end, and it's going to activate most of the buds along the way, right? In other words, the energy that the tree has stored from this stage to when we cut it back, it only has so much energy. You can feed it as much as you like, it's not going to be able to take any feed. In other words, whatever is in this tree is in this tree. And now we've taken that reserve and we've said, we want you to take that sap and go and feed and activate every single bud in this tree. But now you were going to come in springtime and you were going to cut it back. So what you've effectively done is all of the sap that has come in and all of these buds that have been activated that demand energy, you've cut off. Why would you do that? Do you get that? So what you're doing is you're actually setting the trees back. And the thing that you were wanting to prevent, sap loss, all that sap, you've now said, okay, I saved it. I specifically didn't cut it back because I saved it, and now I've discarded it. Is that making sense? Because that's literally what you've done. And our concern is, well, now we're going to lose sap, or the tree is going to die back over wintertime. Why would it die back over wintertime? Why would this tree die back over wintertime? Do the trees in your garden?
Would you seal that now?
Oh, we'll absolutely seal it now. So I'm going to come to that now. But here's the thing. The trees in your garden, that tree there, that's a deciduous tree, it's a syringa. Does that have massive dieback? I can tell you it gets frack coat here because there's no shelter and it's flat. This is probably one of the first places in this entire area that gets frost, and it'll get frost every single day in winter. Will that tree die back? And our thinking is it dies back because it's cold. Then that makes no sense. Do you get that? So there's another reason it dies back, and it's not because it's cold. If anything, it would most likely be because it stays too wet in wintertime, and the roots start to to rot, and because they rot, then you get dieback at the top of the tree. But it's certainly not because it's cold, and it's certainly not because you cut it back. Look at the hedges in your garden that you cut back, and you cut them back until the last. You don't leave the last flush of foliage because you're worried about dieback in spring. Am I right in saying that? You cut the damn thing because then it looks lovely in the whole of winter, and then when summer comes, it all grows again. Why? Because the ground, the water didn't sit in water. So my thinking is that there's another reason. Now, I talk about bonsai consumables, and I hate paying for bonsai consumables like all of us. It's a grudge purchase. Paying for wire is a grudge purchase. Paying for sealant is a grudge purchase. But I'll pay it gladly because it's the best money you can pay. Any of these, and this one I love. I absolutely love this little sealant. Why? Because it's so easy to put on little ends like this. I don't. Oopsie, this is still quite a lot in here. I don't worry about. I don't get in my fingers. I can just and that's quite a lot. But I would just touch it wherever. It's a nice little applicator, and you use very little. No. And the reason wood glue won't is because wood glue doesn't have any stimulants, it doesn't have any antibacterial properties, it doesn't have any, it's not going to help to callus over. It will seal it for sure. It will absolutely seal it. So there, tick on that box. But it doesn't have all the other properties. And that's also okay. It's worked for years and years and years for you. But whether I'm buying wood glue, whether I'm buying this, and this lasts me like a year, I'm happy to pay the money for me. It's 230 Rand. But wood glue absolutely seals it, for sure. The only thing we need to worry about is watering. The nice thing about this stuff is that it doesn't come off when you water. But I won't water the tree until I'm sure that I'll water the bottom and make sure it's dried nicely. Okay, and the nice thing about the pink is it will peel off. Okay, so I want to talk to you about this tree, and I want to talk to you about building deciduous trees. Any questions so far? Thanks, Johan. Any questions? No? Okay. So this tree has got such a rad history. I was living in Morningside, and I'd come back from Port Elizabeth, and I'd lost most of my maples because my maples really did hate Port Elizabeth. And they hated Port Elizabeth for a couple of reasons. They hated Port Elizabeth because of the wind. Japanese maples are wind averse, they don't dig it. And you can put up screens and you can protect them, but I never did. And then they don't like the fact that Port Elizabeth is so temperate that it doesn't have distinct seasons. So even though Osaka is quite, it is very, very humid and extremely hot summers, the winters are cold enough that they have distinct winters and summers, which is why Durban, again, our Japanese, they don't dig Durban so much. So I bought a tree in a nursery, and typical bonsai enthusiast, we like to buy the trees that are discarded by the rest of the world because they're not growing well, because we can save them. Yeah, exactly. We can save them. And there was this tree, and it was a grafted hybrid. It was one of those ones with, they produce yellow leaves and very short, almost all similar Japanese maple leaves. And I bought it because of what it was, and I thought I can save this tree. And I was so good at saving it that I didn't realize that it had started a new shoot from the bottom that was normal palmatum. And what we know about any grafted tree where you're replacing the foliage, it will always, if you allow the bottom to grow with original foliage, it'll drop the grafted foliage, right? Because the grafted foliage is weaker. So never ever allow any of your grafted trees to grow from the base with original foliage. Anyway, went away, and part of the cancer journey, it didn't get watered, and I lost the whole grafted section of the tree. But the bottom grew, and that was great. And I had this trunk that grew out from here, and it was really cool, and it survived everything in the cancer years, and it was in a big garden container. And then it was literally the only Japanese maple that I had in my garden. And I decided I was going to style it, sort of a Bunjin style, literati style, and I styled it the best that I could at the top and at the bottom branch, and it looked okay. And a couple of years later, I looked at this tree and I thought, what are you doing? This is never going to be a good bonsai. You've only got it because it's a Japanese maple. And I thought, okay, what I'm going to do is I am going to graft off the top of the tree. I'm going to graft off the apex, and I'm going to graft off the other branch, and I'm going to have 2 smaller little shown trees, right? And then I had a Deshoyo tree that came in from Japan, just a little trunk, nothing special, but it had too many branches at the top. Instead of cutting it off, I thought, let me just let it grow, and I'm going to use it to graft. And then there was a one long shoot, and I thought, let me replace the foliage on the base of the tree with the shoyo. At the same time, I'm going to air layer the tops off, and I'm going to create a shoyo from that tree. So what I did is I drilled through the hole, and what kind of a graft is that? Thread graft. I drilled a hole through the tree, and I threaded the shoyo, I defoliated it, and around about November, and I threaded it through, and I bent it up, and I waited for it to grow. But when I threaded it, I made sure that the first 2 buds that came through, the tree were exactly where I wanted them. I wanted one up and I wanted one down, and the trunk was literally there. So I threaded it because I knew that this wasn't ever going to be my branch. My branch was going to come from those 2 buds, right? So this is the top bud, and the bottom bud I cut off completely. That was over there. So there's a fat trunk that came out of here, and I used this trunk to approach graft that branch here, and to approach graft this branch here. So essentially, the only thing of the original tree that I ever had is this short piece of trunk. Everything else has been grafted on, and it's all the shoyo. So this is all the shoyo foliage grafted onto normal palmatum. And in a very short space of time, you can see how it's healed over. And I've got some choices to make. I can either cut it off here and use one of these 2, probably this one for an apex, or I can keep it going and use, I'm going to tell you quite a lot about how to cut back Japanese maples, a lot of deciduous trees, so you can encourage back budding and build a better tree. Because I think what we often do is we just grow with what's there. Instead of saying, no, what's there, I can do better. It might take another couple of seasons, but I'm going to land up with a much, much, much better tree. So this tree I'm going to cut back now, and I'm going to explain why I'm going to cut it back as hard as I'm going to cut it back, and what I'm hoping to achieve. But what you'll notice is that there's only one branch here that has got a really long first internode. So I'm not even going to let this thicken up. Why? Because it's always, always, always going to have this thick internode. So I would far rather cut it back there, leaving a bit for sap to. Ah, yes. So sorry. There are 2 little buds right there against the trunk. Okay. Yeah, I would never have cut it off if they weren't. Okay. But having said that, what I know about maples in particular, and I'm going to show you a couple of examples here, is that even if you cut it right back and there are no buds, you will get buds. Right. So older wood, and then there's another very important factor. Can anybody tell me what that is? If those buds have been activated in the past and they've died off, you ain't going to get more buds. So if the tree is really suffered and it's been cut back hard and you've already had those buds, you had your chance, and it's gone. So if I cut this is very important, great point. I think you can see it better from here. If I cut this tree off here, I've killed the tree. There will be no latent buds this low down in the tree. None. Not in a Japanese maple. So the only way that I could use this trunk is to graft something onto it before I cut it back. So Chinese maple again, so as the seed comes up, so say the seed came up, where the first original 2 little leaves were, you'll get a node. Beneath that, you'll never get any growth. So even on Chinese maple, if I cut it below where the first leaf was, it's dead. You can throw it away. If I cut it above where the first leaves were, anytime, I can get growth all over it. Agreed. Same thing with the celsus. You've just got to be really careful where it is on the trunk. Okay, so what I'm going to do with this tree, and again, what I'm going to do here, and the roots are starting to look quite nice. It's starting to develop some bark, but I am going to cut this back quite hard. I would normally have waited a little bit longer, right? I would normally have waited until the leaves were like this before, and you can see they're almost falling off on their own. That's the right time to do it. This is a little bit too early. This is fine. Makes sense. This is so and the reason for that is there is an opportunity that when I cut all of this off, this tree might start to, the buds might start to swell, and that's not, and I don't want that, and I don't want that now. But as long as you then rather wait until the leaves fall off, then you're 100% safe. It will definitely not shoot back. But normally once they've got this far, they're done. And so this one, I'm pretty confident that I can do that. And so what I'm going to do with these two trees is I'm going to cut back so that you can see what I'm going to do. Any questions? Okay, by the way, Japanese maples, you won't frequently completely defoliate the tree because they are a lot weaker than Trident maples. However, if the tree is super healthy, like this, you can see it's had a very good season. I've cut back quite a lot. I would happily have defoliated this tree if I'd had the time and if I thought it was at the right place. Because long internodes, it was repotted this season. The root growth is amazing. And I wouldn't, at the right time of the year, I had no problem doing it. But there are a lot of Japanese maples that I wouldn't do that with. I'm going to talk about that big one just now. Okay, yeah. So what I'm doing now is I'm cutting right back to the first internode. Why? Now the same thing with a tree like this. I can see that I can activate these two little nodes there. I could cut this right back, and then I'm going to have much shorter tidal ramification. But this is not a tree that I'm thinking of showing one day in the future or anytime soon. So I'm not worried about a couple of longer internodes. And I've already done the right stuff with it so that the nodes are pretty short. It's got decent movement. So I'm happy just to cut back to where I want the tree. Right, now this here, I've wired it, and it's a brand new little shoot. Now, what's quite interesting about this little shoot here is it's the back shoot of the branch that I used to approach graft. So when I approach grafted, I cut a wedge into the bark. I then scrape the cambium on this side. I put it against here. I got those little pins that have got like sort of a bigger flat area, little like drawing pin type things, and I nailed the pins in. So I nailed it onto the tree so it couldn't move in a wood callus. And so what's quite cool is that just like this, the buds on the front is this branch, and the buds at the back are this branch. So I've managed to get two branches in different positions through one approach graft. Now this, I could cut back now, but I really want this branch. So I'm going to leave this. I'm not even going to defoliate it because this is, I don't want to lose it. So I'm not going to risk it. I'm not going to cut it back. I'm just going to leave this branch for now. Okay, so that's why I'm leaving that one. All of the others, I'm cutting back to first internodes. This one here, you can see it is way too long for this section here with no internodes. Now, if I like it and it's thick, I've got the option to graft more foliage onto it further back. But you can see how vigorous it is. I really don't think I need to do that. And so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut it right back to the first two little buds there. And I could do that with all of these branches as well, but I'm happy not to. So even this one, I'm thinking, so I've got two internodes there, and I've got another two there. If I cut it, I'm not going to get one here. So if I cut it back any further than this, I'm left with these two. Am I okay with that? So I'm gonna go there, and you never know. So here, it's exactly what I mentioned before. Let's just cut these two leaves off. So here I've got this very long internode, and I've got nothing in between, but there are buds on both sides. So what I can do, and what the Japanese do often, is they will have, and I'll show you on that tree, two branches coming out of the same place in the trunk. No issue. And I can still decide on that one. And you can see here, I cut that off this season, and you can see how it's already cut over. Why? Because I'm using, so let me explain this quickly. So who knows the difference between these two cut pastes? This is putty, it's sealant cut paste. So Michael, they hardly ever use this, and as far as he's concerned, and glue or any liquid. And the reason is because their thinking is that fills in the gaps in between the fibers of the wood, and it doesn't heal over nearly as easily, whereas this stuff doesn't. So they go through tubs of this stuff. What is the difference? Which one? Can't you read the Japanese, for goodness sake? Okay, so very good. Well done, Johan. So this is the evergreen, and this is the deciduous, so the green lid. So this one's for evergreen trees because it's got a lot more callousing stuff in it. And this one's got not so much callousing stuff in it. Hormones, thank you very much. So deciduous trees, as we know, callus extremely vigorously and can produce quite ugly calluses. So deciduous, where you're not promoting as much, but it seals it and promotes the growth and the callusing, and the evergreen, because evergreens, you struggle to get the callusing over. So that's the difference between these two. Okay, so I'm almost done with this tree. Now, as you can see, having cut it back, you're like, oh my goodness, Richard, you've really set that tree back. You've cut all the growth off it. I couldn't care, because next season, I'm going to leave this because it's still growing. Next season, I'm going to have double the number of branches on the same tree, literally. And I'm going to have more growth. For instance, I left this because those were the only two buds that I had. There were no buds lower down. After I cut that off, this time last year, before spring, I already had all of these buds. None of these buds were here. I already activated these buds purely because I cut it back there. There were no buds in it. But I didn't want to take the chance by cutting it off there, then there weren't any buds, or it wasn't activated. So on a maple, you'll almost always be able to activate back budding, and then you've got choices. I really could cut it back to here for 1 or 2, or I could leave it longer. There's the front of my tree. I'm pretty happy. I actually want this tree to be quite a lot bigger, so I'm just going to let it grow. So I'm happy for now. All I am going to go and do now is I'm going to remove the weeds, and I'm going to get rid of the roots. And what you will discover underneath here is that there's actually a really, really rad nabari that pretty much extends all the way around. So if I wanted to really develop this tree, if this is a tree that I thought, you know what, in 5 years from now, whoopsie, that was very close, sorry tree, in 5 years from now, I want a much better tree, then what I would do is take it out of this container, I would put it into a bigger one, or put it into one of those plastic seed trays, lots of drainage, and I would literally cut off the bottom. I would put it onto a piece of plywood, screw through the plywood into the tree, and I would graft probably 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 little maple whips onto that. And in literally just 3 years of the grafting of the whips and putting it onto the plywood, I would already have one of those really nice, like, saucepan neobaris. They're that easy. Yeah. So I think I wanted to bring this one just as a really cool example of. No, must be a palmatum. Yeah. Unfortunately, the trident won't graft on, but it doesn't have to be a deshoyal. It can just be normal. And in fact, if this was a straight deshoyal, I'm going to show you something cool about this one. If this was a straight deshoyal from cutting, for instance, or from an air layer, you could still graft straight palmatum onto deshoyal wood because it's palmatum. Burgerianum is different. So all I'm going to do now is just go ahead and, oh my goodness, I'm pushing too hard. I think it's just because this is hot, and just seal all of this. It's so quick and easy, and what this makes is that you don't lose any sap. And that's exactly what. But the cool thing is, around none of these, because it's perfect time of the year, it's not even wet. And you know, even in spring or summer, if you cut back a Japanese maple, it starts to bleed. There's zero of bleeding, which is cool. Any questions on this one? I will take off the moss completely. The reason it is so thick is because I use a top dressing, so it's like literally a layer, and then underneath it you can see it's inorganic soil, so it is akadama, crushed leca, and pumice, But this is solid. It's pretty solid because what I use is I take sphagnum moss, I dry it, I then use a sieve and I rub the sphagnum moss through the sieve so it comes out the bottom. It's quite fine. I then take moss like this. I've always got a container in the garage that has got moss. This literally, I'll take this off, put it in the container and let it dry in the garage. I've always got that container. And then what I'll do with the sieve is I'll take this dried moss and do the same thing. Every single one of these things, every single one of them is a spore. And I mix that together and I sprinkle it over the surface in springtime. And what that means is that the surface doesn't dry out. I'm encouraging fine rooting. So I'm making sure that I'm protecting all the fine rooting here. And within 3 to 4 weeks, solid moss. And then that's it for the season. Sorry? Very quick. Super quick. Because it's a sphagnum moss that doesn't dry out. The only thing you've got to do, so I will normally wet the surface of the soil first, then sprinkle it on. And if it's windy, don't bother. Because as you sprinkle, it's like... So you just need to protect it because obviously it's very dry. But once you've done them, and then I water very, very gently. But as soon as it's wet, you can water and it doesn't wash off. It's amazing. But it's such a cool way of developing moss. Even soil like that's one issue with Ecodoma pumice and lava, especially if it's a medium and you don't have fine on the top, is it dries out super quickly and moss doesn't grow. Okay, so that's that one. Any questions? How are we doing for time? I've got 2 trees to chat about, then I'm done. Good that I've only got 2 trees left. Oh, thanks. Thank you. Just wondering. Just tell me, Mr. Chairman. Okay, so this is a deshoyo that came in from Japan. It wasn't expensive because all I bought was the trunk. All the branches on it were roughly this sort of thickness, and that was 4.5 years ago. It was a lot taller, and I chose it because of the movement. Now, the difference between this tree and that tree is very little, apart from the fact that this was designed and produced in Japan. It was always intended to be a grafted tree. Now, where was this tree grafted?
A little bit higher.
Yeah. There we go. Okay, so unlike the grafted maples that we get in South Africa that you buy in a nursery, where it is a trunk, let me move this. Sorry? Yes, you get an arguing log. So they have this long tree and then they graft that at the top here. Correct. All just for a bigger tree. And then that is useless for us. But if you do have a tree like that and you want to use it for bonsai, fear not. The best thing that you can do is graft it, is air layer it on the graft. So literally what you're doing then is, and you'll see it normally splits because it's a what do they call that graft where the thing in the middle? Split off, yeah. So what you'll do there is halfway through the graft. So you're still getting straight palmatum roots, but a grafted top. So you're still keeping them in modern roots. And we all, I'm sorry, air layer. And we all know when we layer and encourage new branches, it automatically swells out. So I've done that with quite a few trees, and you get a really rad base, and then you get the whatever the graft it is, whether that is bloodgood, whether that is shishikashira, it doesn't really matter. But that's a cool way. So don't think, oh well, it's grafted there, I can't use it. As long as that portion of trunk is you've got some kind of movement, or you can use it, you can graft on the graft. So these trees in Japan, they do it differently. Because it's for bonsai, they graft really, really low down. But now this is the interesting thing, and I really, really want to drive this point home about maples. We worry so much about scarring on maples. We worry so much about wire bite on maples. And we're told, you mustn't, and you've got to wrap it in paper, and you've got to be so, so careful. What I've seen from trees coming from Japan is that is absolute rubbish as long as the tree is in formation stage. The only time you need to worry about that is when the tree is highly ramified, because at that point in time, you're not going to get rid of the scars on branches. But up until that point in time, it's almost bomb-proof. So literally, you could, I beg your pardon? Like a fig. So here, you will see, so there you'll see how this tree, this was wired, and the wire bit in heavily. The wire bit in heavily here. I have no issues. Because once this tree barks up, and I'm going to show you this big tree, it barks over the scar, and you'll never see it. And here's a great example. So this is a tree. This is a trunk top, right? But now look at what has happened to the bark striations that are running through the scar out the top. Running through the scar out the top. Can you see those there? Give this another couple of years, you won't know that there was a scar there. It is literally barking over the scar, and the bark will hide. I mean, when you got a moment, come closer. But you'll see that the striation from the bottom, look at that little striation mark, runs all the way through, comes out the top and continues to run over. So the striations are running over the scar. That's how amazing it is. And this trunk was heavily scarred when I bought it. And if you look at the trunk there, you can't see any evidence of scarring at all. So please don't think that you can't heavily wire maples and you need to be really, really worried. Obviously, you don't want to excessively go and do it, but it certainly is not what we've been taught. Okay, now here again, you can see there's some problems. Very, very long growth. This tree, I've learned a lot on. It got heat damage for 2 seasons, and I didn't get much growth, and I lost branches. There's 1 year I made the fatal error of, in winter, I mixed, what is that white winter spray? The oil, oleum. I mixed oleum and lime sulfur together, and both of them I mixed at the full recommended strength. I mixed them together and I sprayed it on the trees, and as it was winter, I didn't water much, and I landed up getting horrible, horrible dieback in spring. So I learned. So I learned, and I will spray either one or the other, and I will spray it slightly diluted, even for the bottle for these trees. Now, in Japan, in wintertime with lime sulfur, they will brush on to maples. You've seen how white their maples are. They brush on lime sulfur, pure lime sulfur. Even the Celtus, okay. They brush it on. I'm amazed at just literally brush the stuff on and leave it. And it creates that white. Obviously, it's also good for the tree because you're getting rid of all of the little bugs and mites and things that overwinter. But that's literally what they do. So lime sulfur is pretty safe on its own, but oleum definitely not. And oleum is the oil residue that sticks on the tree. Yeah. So this tree again, all I'm doing here is showing you. But now this, in fact, let me just do this. Let me just take this off. But you can. Sorry. It is, and the reason it's so easy is because it's literally a top dressing. You're literally making a top dressing, so it's super easy. But what you can see here, and this will hopefully dry out before you leave, is what an incredible base it has. So this is something I'm going to show you on that last tree. This one's been in the country for the same amount of time as, no, 1 year longer than that little. So this one came in September 2021. No, or not for trees, not for Japanese trees. I'm going to explain to you in a second. This one was 15, and it was in a just a normal oval Japanese production pot. So this is a Tokonoma pot. So this is a Yozan, but the reason deciduous trees in Japan are expensive is because they have to be worked on every single year. They have to be wired every single year. They have to be meticulously grown branch by branch. So this tree is kind of mistakes. And so this would have been a decent, thickish palmatum where the roots had already been worked on. I mean, you can see the roots. It's a really nice base. They've already been worked on. It's then grafted. From the graft, you've then got to produce this trunk. You've got to wire the trunk and let it go. Then you've got to make sure that all the branches, you've got to get, so it arrived with all the branches already been down. So just that in its own. So unfortunately, a decent, and that one I'm going to show you is not a decent Japanese maple is going to start start at around about 85 to 100,000 rand. Start. No, start. And a really good one that would go into Kokofu or Taikon 10 is going to start at about 2.5 million yen. So that's the purchase price of the tree. 2.5 million yen. That's 270,000 rand.
What did it go on?
This? Yeah. Oh, this is normal straight palm martin. Yeah. So all of the hybrids are on straight palm martin. Yeah, the box, it's the same palm martin, identical. Okay, so that's pretty much this one here. I'm going to take back. Even if I cut these right back, I know it's coming. This one's too much. So really, you can see where I'm going with this. But for now, I'm pretty happy with where it's at. And now all of the buds that are left, all the sap that's here are going to go into only those buds. So I'm going to get much better, stronger growth and on fewer branches. Any questions? I've left this one. Why? Because it's still a little bit green and it's a branch I really want because it died off with that oleum accident. Any questions? What I have learned about Deshoyo and Sagan and Shishigashira, those are the three varieties I've gotten from Japan, is as much as in the beginning of the season they look super strong and they can withstand the same conditions as the normal ones, as soon as we get to November, when it really gets hot in Gauteng, 40% at least. That is what I have found. Because they're super strong, lots of buds, but I just didn't get that second flash. Perfect. And you've got a keeper soul. Any questions with this one? You see, pretty rad tree. And again, lots of branches coming out of the same place. No problem. All right, the last tree, last but not least. Okay, so Hannes asked me, well, how come this tree seems so green and it just looks like it's in the middle of summer? The reason for that is because this tree came from Japan and it landed in February. This one was also Taikon 10 on one of the sales tables. This will give you a good indication. The first 3 days that Michael was there, this tree was not on the sales table of the vendor he bought it from. It was on another table. He saw it at somebody else's stand. And the last day of Taikon 10, this tree was on somebody else's stand. In other words, they bought it from that nursery and were just flipping it. That's what happens with trees in Japan. And when I get trees in, people say to me, oh, so please tell me the history of the tree. Does it come with a certificate? Do we know who grew it and where? And I'm like, I could make up some shit for you, but because you really need to know. But the person who bought it wouldn't even have asked the person they bought it from where the tree came from. It's irrelevant. Unless it's a tree of stature, it is absolutely irrelevant. The next question they asked me, how old is this tree? Well, I think it is 37.5 years old. And the only reason it's saying half is because it's half of the season, but I think it's that. Okay, so there are a couple of things I want to show you about this tree, and I love it. So when I saw it, I bought it. And part of the reason I bought it is because it was relatively inexpensive for a Japanese maple in Japan. Now, the reason it was relatively inexpensive is because it's only really half built. Number one, most of the branches, if I wanted to do it properly, I'm going to have to cut off the branches and do it again. So I've got a couple of choices. Either I cut the branches off and I leave, so I cut it back to the trunk and I leave that much off the trunk. And if I do that, I will stimulate branches around it. What I won't do is cut it back and then with branch cutters, concave branch cutters, cut a concave and seal over it, because then I won't get any, I'll get no growth. So I would rather cut it right back and leave a little stump, and I know I'll get shoots around the stump. Once they've grown, I'll then cut it back hard and have a scar, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing I can do on this tree, and unfortunately you can't really see it now, but if you come a little bit later underneath the tree, you'll see some of the branches I can keep, but quite a few of the ones I can keep because they are the right thickness for where they are in the trunk and for the diameter of the trunk, I can keep them, but the first node is too long, or it's just, I don't like the direction. And what I can do there is I can graft. So I can literally graft on foliage. Since the tree landed, I haven't cut it back. I could have done the outside pruning, but I thought it's a maple, I'm going to cut most of it off anyway, so I'd rather just let it grow and let it do its thing. Now, part of the reason I bought this tree is it's got the most amazing nibari, and it's got insanely old bark. If you look at this old bark. But now, how do you think they got the movement on this trunk? Do you think they bent the trunk for movement?
Cut and grow.
They cut?
Cut and grow.
Cut and grow with the trunk? No. The cut and grow is right, but not the trunk. No. So if we look here, they grow sacrifice branches. So there's a massive branch that was allowed to grow there, and what that does is that creates this, you can imagine all the sap flow that goes up in this direction. Look at the striations of the bark. You can imagine how strongly, and then you get this bulge where the trunk comes out, and then what happens then? Then you cut it off, and then there's exactly what I'm going to do higher up. You rely on the buds at the base of that branch to create the actual branch. So that's part of the process I've loved in seeing a couple of trees and being able to work on them, is just to start understanding things that we don't necessarily understand. Because after years, I'll be growing something and think, but why doesn't it look the same? Why am I not getting the movement? Why am I not getting the thickness? What am I doing wrong? It's 100% reduction. But even having said that, it is still if you look at even if you saw the structure going up and the movement going and the age of it's a really, really good trunk. And there's no scars on the trunk, which is why I wanted it. I want the base. I love the movement. The taper is perfect. The size, this is a chew-in size. Everything is there. No scars on the trunk is really great. I just need to start branching again. Or I can leave it like this and just enjoy the tree and let it grow out and develop it in a much bigger ramified tree. Choice is mine. Also a very good option. But I've learned a hell of a lot. So here again, there's a bit of it. It's only let down on the base is that gap there. But here, so this is also interesting. You'll see there's a little bit of leaf burn, right? Now, the reason for that is because it came in February. So now it's having its spring in February. So those very brand new leaves are shooting out in our hectic heat in February. And the second thing is it was a much smaller pot. So what I did after I saw that it was taking damage, I thought, let me just slip pot it into something a little bit bigger. So I did bring one pine with me. But I mean, it's not really. This isn't really about pines. Do you want to see it? Okay, I'll go and get it. Because that's a really good discussion as to what we do and why we do it and how we leave it. And that pine discussion is a good one. Maybe a nice way to end off. So even these longer runners, I will wait until the leaves have dropped off, and then I'll go in and clean it up. So there's another crate coming in, hopefully the end of May, first week in June. And that's probably the last opportunity we've got to bring trees in where they've still got enough time to lose leaves, because now they're coming in summer, so full summer growth into our beginning of winter, and then they'll have enough of a downtime and then then get it spring again. And I've seen with trees that Terry's brought in that works well. Then I would give it a gap and leave it until sort of September again. Otherwise, it's just too much. Their trees have had a full summer. They've gone into autumn, and now they're coming into our spring, so they don't actually get a winter, which isn't fantastic. It won't kill the tree. No, but you will just set it back. So I would set this tree back if I treated it the way we treat our trees in spring. So I should have cut these all back by now. I should have cut the bigger leaves on partially defoliate. I would have done that already, but I didn't do that. So I would rather waste a season but have a really strong tree that has a great season next season than try not to waste a season but have a weak season next season. And I mean, it's expensive, so you don't really want to mess with it. So this is something I want to tell you. if you took 500 Rand, so this tree here, and I mean, I've done a lot to this tree, and it's come a long way in a short space of time, and it's developing nice bark, and it's coming a long way, right? Or this tree. So this tree was 15 or 16, the Sagan, anyway, somewhere around there. But in the time I've had it, I've only really been able to start a branch structure. This tree here, I've built new foliage, I've drastically reduced the height of the tree, and it's scarring. I've done quite a lot to it, but essentially, this has been a 5-year project. This one that came in 2021, 5 years. If I took 500 Rand a month, and I just put it into a little import kitty, 500 Rand, 6,000 Rand a year, that is 30,000 Rand. That 30,000 Rand would have bought the tree at Taikan 10, and then I just under double that to bring it in. But I will not produce this in 20 years, a trunk like this. So that's how I look at it. I'm buying time. That's actually all I'm doing. I'm buying time. And I'm also learning through what I'm buying. And it works for me. I don't have a lot of time. But I also enjoy doing that. So I'm kind of looking at probably a collection of probably 60% trees where I'm building and doing my thing, and 40% where I'm working on things that are many years advanced and I probably wouldn't have produced it in my lifetime. That's for me. Okay, let me go and get a tree. So this too, I'd love you to have a look underneath this one. Again, you're going to learn a lot about Japanese trees. And this was a tree, it was exposed root and it's fused. But if you look at how many branches are coming out of the tree in the same place, we would never do that. Never. Because we haven't been taught that way. One. Well, then the tree's going to be here. Yeah. And if you look at this, and especially a showing tree, but again, here, I've got to be really careful in terms of how I keep it. But this is still showing. But oh, no, it's nice. Oh, that's really rad. So part of what I'm doing is, I'm sure you know from my situation, cancer, I can't get life insurance. Or if I do, I have to pay a hell of a lot for it. So what I'm trying to do is trying to invest in some bonsai that will leave value, which is quite a cool thing to do. And the other thing too, living in the moment, is, I mean, I don't know how many times in my life I've been told I'm going to die. So what am I actually waiting for? So this is a really cool tree, and I've learned a lot about bunjin from what I've seen in Japan. So I've shown Michael a bunch of things that I've been growing because I want to get a really nice bunjin Japanese maple. But my tallest Japanese maple from my thing is probably about this high. And the first thing he says to me is, it's not tall enough. I'm like, what do you mean it's not tall enough? He says, bunjin is 800 millimeters minimum for decent bunjin trees in Japan. I was like, wow, you got to be kidding me. Yes. Michael McTeague, the apprentice at Fujikawa Kuken, Canadian. He is one of the most respected Westerners in Japan and has a bunch of Japanese people asking him to work in the tree. So he still works for Fujikawa. Really phenomenal, really phenomenal. So Michael styled this tree. It's a Japanese red pine in a Yamaki Toshio pot. There are a couple of things that are really interesting for me in this tree, right? Number one, the height. Love the height. But I want you to come and have a look. So when the tree came into the nursery, so Fujikawa bought the tree, came into the nursery, and asked Michael to style it. Michael has taken off 2 biggish branches. But now, something that we've been taught, and you can see it's still weeping a little bit, is we must leave the bark on a pine, because otherwise it's going to weep and it's going to lose sap and you're going to lose strength. So leave the bark on the pine until it's dead, and then when the branch is dead, you then take the bark off. That's what we've been taught. That's not what they do. The other thing I've always been taught is especially when you're working on a tree like this and you do quite a lot of work, is you need to seal around where you cut it back to the tree. And Michael says again, depending on the size of the wound, but absolutely not. So there's a good example of that. But what I love most about this tree is it's a tree that has been styled as a bunjin for pretty much most of its life, and where it's got really, really pretty gentle movement, and then suddenly at the top it goes nuts. comes back and comes around, comes back. But that same movement is throughout all the branching, which I really, really, really like. Now, what I also want to tell you about this tree, which I found striking, is when I saw the photograph of the tree after Michael had worked on it, he sent me a picture of before, and I was like, oh, that's quite cool. I'm quite keen to see what you're going to do with the tree. And one of the things he said to me is, Rich, what I'm quite chuffed about this tree is that I don't have to wire everything. And that's something else I've really learned, is one of the greatest skills that I've admired in Japanese professionals is somebody who can wire. And if you'd seen this tree without the growth, it's grown since it arrived in South Africa, and it arrived in the first week of March. So it's been a very, very short space of time, and you can see the long candles. But if you'd seen the tree, it was the Kukuin style is very stylized, maybe overly stylized. It's like sharp lines, and how much of the tree is not wired, and the skill required to create that incredibly sharp silhouette without having to wire absolutely everything. But what I noticed most is, can you see that the bark is different from there downwards and upwards? What does it look like? So something else we've been taught is we don't ever touch the bark, and most trees you wouldn't. Now, I asked him, I said, why would you remove? And he brushed off all of the old bark. I was like, what? And that is what they will do with tall Bunjin red pines. Can you imagine? Can you think why? It looks older at the bottom. Yes. Not scale. No. So what this represents is this really old tall tree that grew out of the middle of a forest, and the sort of grew out of the canopy. And this part is exposed to the winds and the conditions. And because it's been hit by the winds and the conditions, it has less bark in it and has bark where it's protected by the canopy of the forest. I was like, wow. Interesting, hey? So what I'd encourage you to do, and again, come and have a look at his wiring. And what I've learned, and I've only unwired one tree so far that he has wired, I've learned more by taking somebody else's wire off than I've learned in books, people applying the wire. Because when you're taking it off, you have to understand which direction, why, how many pieces, how long the pieces, why wired over other people, how they wire over it. It's been an amazing lesson for me. Anyway, a really cool tree that I dig. Now, what I won't do with this, I won't decandle. So we would normally, this was our spring, a little bit, once these needles have hardened off, and if you pull them and they don't come off easily, so you see they're still coming off, but as soon as you can pull a little bit, tug a little bit, and the needles don't come out, they've hardened off, and then you can decandle. And because the tree is pretty ramified, and it's in, it's pretty strong, you can see the candles, I would probably decandle almost everything on this tree, but I'm not going to do that now. Why? Because this is autumn. So what I will do, either I've got to let it skip a season, but then I'm going to have to cut right back hard and hope that it buds out where I want it to, or I can treat this pine like I would my other pines in autumn, and late autumn with pines, we then go in and cut back, we pluck needles, and we choose buds. And that I could definitely do. It's definitely strong enough. But what I don't want to do is set it back. Red pines in Osaka are under protection all year. Again, I would never have thought that here. So here we don't normally protect our pines. White pines under protection the whole year. Black pines not under protection at all. Again, it's been very, very interesting for me. Any questions? Can I show you okay, I'm not going to decandle this one now, but essentially what we're going to do is we're going to, so you've got a couple of options here. So let's have a look at this one here. So traditionally you would take off the entire candle right back to the old needles. And then at the base of those old needles, it'll produce more buds. So you're going to ramify it. And at that base, once I cut that off, I will then choose in autumn buds that I want. And I will only choose two.
YouTube, and it doesn't really decandle
no. Decanting spring, yes. Once I've got no. So
what's the juice now?
Yes, but now I could do this in autumn. Not quite yet. I don't think I'll have a problem decanting this now in autumn. Or if I was worried about losing old growth, I could then cut the candle back to there, and then I know I'm going to get new buds around the new sections. So that I might do, and then cut back further later because I know it will push back later. But even if you look at this tree, and the front of the tree is pretty much there, so there's a small gap between here. But if you even just look at the placement and how he's brought, how there's volume in each one of the pads, it's pretty remarkable for me. And how the apex is created. I've learned a hell of a lot. And I can't wait to learn more. Just, yeah, it's been cool. If you aren't, I do try and share quite a lot of the bonsai stuff on Instagram. I've got an Instagram account that is just Bonsai Rich. It's only bonsai. And what I try and do when I put stuff up is explain what I've done or why I've done or what I've learned or mistakes I've made, and try and share that, because there aren't a lot of people in South Africa who put that sort of detail online that you can see with pictures that's accessible. There's not a lot of that unless you come to clubs like this where there's tons of it and it's amazing. But there might not be species that you're working with, or there might not be things at the time. And so I also try and put it up, seasonal work. I'll put it up, this is why I'm doing this thing at this time, and this is the result. And so if you do want to follow, please come and find me, and you're always welcome to ask questions.
Bonsai Rich.
Bonsai Rich. Bonsai.rich. Yeah.